You step through the front door after an absolutely brutal day. You twist the deadbolt, drag the blind shut, and let out a long, heavy breath. You finally have a moment of peace. You are completely, wonderfully alone. But for 99.9% of human history, a human sitting by themselves in a silent, enclosed space was not relaxing. They were prey. The idea that solitude equals safety is one of the strangest, most recent inventions our species has ever made. For almost the entire span of human existence, the opposite was true. Being alone didn't mean peace. It meant something had gone badly wrong. And the real reason your body secretly hates being alone is darker, stranger, and will completely change the way you look at your locked front door forever. Let's start with a discovery that shouldn't exist. In 1958, archaeologists excavating a mound in the sun-baked plains of Anatolia uncovered Çatalhöyük. It was one of the very first dense human habitats on Earth. But what they found completely broke our understanding of personal space. Çatalhöyük was not a city of quiet neighborhoods and private lawns. It was a solid, continuous honeycomb of mud brick houses packed so tightly together that streets did not exist. For roughly 8,000 people, the concept of a front door was physically impossible. The walls were unbroken. You walked across your neighbor's rooftops to get anywhere. And you entered your own home by climbing down a wooden ladder through a smoke-filled hole in the ceiling. There were no private rooms. There was no personal space. You lived, cooked, and slept shoulder to shoulder with your family in a single plastered room. It was a population density that would make a modern Tokyo apartment feel like an empty mansion. And here's where it gets deeply unsettling. They didn't just share this confined space with the living. They buried their ancestors directly beneath the clay platforms where they slept and ate. To a modern mind, resting your head inches above human remains sounds macabre. But to them, it was the ultimate desperate rejection of isolation. Even in death, you were kept fiercely within the fold of the family. You were never allowed to leave. Now, some of you are thinking, sure, but that was one weird ancient town. Humans naturally crave solitude now, right? Fair question. But that is a dangerous assumption. Before we built mud walls, we were entirely nomadic, and the record there is even starker. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer groups document a lifestyle of radical, inescapable proximity. Camp space is shared. Sleeping mats are shared. Infants are held or touching a caregiver almost constantly for the first years of life. Solitary sleep. Solitary eating. Solitary walking. These barely exist as concepts in the historical record of foraging societies. Privacy was not a boundary you set to protect your mental health. Privacy was a void that invited death. We had no armored scales, no venom, and terrible night vision. A cave hyena's jaw exerted over 1,100 pounds of pressure per square inch. That is enough to crush a human femur, like a dry hollow reed. Our only real weapon was absolute, overlapping proximity to each other. So, if you were out of sight and out of earshot of your tribe in the ancient wilderness, it meant one of three things, and none of them were good. The first, you were hopelessly lost. The second, you had been banished from the group, which, without a tribe's tools, fire, or knowledge, was often a slower version of the exact same sentence. The third, and by far the most likely, something in the dark was currently dragging you away by the throat. We did not want to be left alone, because being alone was, quite literally, a biological death sentence. Thousands of generations of your ancestors fiercely refused to let each other out of their sight. If even one of them had demanded an afternoon of personal space on the savannah, their lineage would have ended in the tall grass. You would simply not exist. The evidence of this isn't just buried in ancient dirt. It is wired into your nervous system right now. In 2003, at UCLA, neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger placed subjects into an fMRI scanner. She used a simple ball-tossing simulation to make them feel deliberately excluded by a group. When she looked at the brain scans, the results were unambiguous. Social exclusion lit up the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. That is not the region that handles sadness or disappointment. It is the exact same circuitry that processes the physical agony of a severed limb or a third-degree burn. Your brain does not clearly distinguish between being left alone and being physically injured. Later clinical trials went even further, giving isolated, lonely people a standard dose of acetaminophen. Ordinary Tylenol measurably dulled their feelings of social rejection. It worked the exact same way. It dulls a headache. Decades of public health research since then has converged on the same conclusion from a different angle. Sustained loneliness carries a mortality risk on par with smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Your biology was engineered so profoundly for community that it treats isolation as a fatal physical wound. and it has never updated the manual. Now, here is the part that is easy to miss. Constant togetherness wasn't only about not getting eaten. It was infrastructure. Sleeping in a pile meant sharing body heat through cold nights with no insulated walls. Living in arm's reach of a dozen other adults meant a mother could hand her infant to a sister, a grandmother, or an aunt and go gather food. More eyes awake at any given moment meant more warning before a predator got close, and every piece of survival knowledge only spread because people were close enough, often enough, to talk. Proximity wasn't the price you paid for survival. It was the survival. You weren't an individual. You were a single cell inside a massive 50-headed sensory organism. One organism with 100 eyes, 100 ears, and a shared immune system of knowledge. Break away from the organism, and the cell dies. For 300,000 years, we huddled in packs to survive the night. 9,000 years ago, we jammed our mud brick homes together to keep the darkness out. 150 years ago, industrialization began pulling the extended family apart, shift by shift, factory by factory. Today, you sit entirely alone in a sealed room, scrolling on a glowing rectangle in total silence. We didn't drift into this. The rise of industrial cities and later, the modern real estate economy turned square footage into status. Systems built around individual ownership sold us more houses, more cars, and more private subscriptions in exchange for the dense kinship ties that had kept humans alive for nearly all of our existence. We traded the tribe for property lines. Today, we treat isolation as the ultimate marker of success. Sprawling homes, soundproof windows, noise-canceling headphones to mute the world, and therapists paid real money to help us figure out why, alone in our climate-controlled rooms, we feel so quietly empty. Drop an ancient hunter-gatherer into a gated suburban neighborhood at dusk, and they wouldn't see luxury. They would see a meticulously manicured graveyard of exiles. We are spending our lives working to purchase the exact condition our ancient nervous system still registers as an emergency. Tomorrow evening, you will come home, twist that deadbolt, and drag the curtains shut against the world, just like you always do. But behind that locked door, your ancient nervous system will be quietly scanning the silence for the heartbeat of a tribe that is no longer there. We didn't invent peace and quiet. We simply paid for our own exile.